Alright, making a video. Anyway. Alright, so this Robert Ritchie guy starting to get on my nerves, which figured that wasn't going to take too long. He seems to just want to talk about quarks and neutrinos and all the little bullshit particles that I clearly have absolutely no interest in. All that shit, you know, all the accelerator crap, the Higgs boson, all that crap goes away once somebody explains what causes gravity and magnetism. And I'm saying clearly, as overtly and as loudly and as clearly and as concisely and as explicitly as possible, I don't need any of those particles to come up with a perfectly functional model. Electricity and magnetism don't need no fucking quarks. They don't need no fucking neutrinos. Don't need no fucking antiparticles. Don't need none of that shit. So if you want to believe all that crap that physics made up, that's made out of experiments even the people doing the experiments can't barely understand, the whole model has been cobbled together out of nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody can understand it. It's crap. You want to believe it? Go ahead and believe it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's worse than religion because it is so incoherent. Because it doesn't even have characters you could even possibly understand. It's not even the Holy Ghost. It's the ghost of Bibble Babble or something. It's just nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing you can make anything out of. So believe it if you want to. I have no interest. It's not the part of physics I need to humiliate and defeat. Part of physics I'm after, okay, is the part that has no energy in their gravity and has no energy in their magnetism, and then doesn't even have a mechanism for magnetism. They don't even understand charge at all. They don't understand that charge is the same thing as magnetism, just in a segregated form. That's my objective. I got no interest in particle physics beyond saying it's crap. It's made up nonsense. So anyway, he's made these videos and he keeps mentioning me as if this has something to do with my theory when it has nothing to do with it. He's saying things like Gary's 3 particles. No, I don't have 3 particles. They're not 3 forces. I've made it clear what there is, right? Two kinds of force, period. That's it. Plus and minus. Electron force, proton force. The fucking end. There's no other crap tied to it. They do one thing. They go from point A to point B in a straight fucking line until they hit a proton or an electron. Period. No forces, no wacky bits, no internal parts, no bullshit. Electrons aren't dipoles. Photons aren't spinning wobbly bullshit. Okay? They do one thing. They impose momentum in a direction. Period. Nothing else. Nothing else. No other possibilities. Shit. So, I mean, I could play some of his video, but it's just such fucking crap that, there's nothing I can say. It has nothing to do with anything I've been talking about in the 1,000 videos I've made. Nothing. No connection whatsoever.
G'day viewers, a bit on neutrinos today. Now while we've got to go back to neutrinos, Gary's bits is 3 different types.
No 3 different types. No, I've just been over it. I only drawn 2 colors. There's not 3 colors. Not 3 different types. None of that crap. Yes, all of the manifestations of force. That is, anytime you see something moving the speed of light or damn close to it, then you can say that's probably a force bit. That's some of that stuff. It's either red or it's blue. But that's it. It's either red or it's blue. That's it. Nothing else. It's either expressing segregation, magnetism, or it's not. It's mixed, and then it's just a gravity force. And if it's at a frequency, then we call it a photon. Okay? Because it can wobble electrons. And that's all that's happening. That's all I've said that's happening. I never said any of this crap that you're implying I said. So quit saying I said there's 3 kinds. There's no 3 kinds.
Henry Cavendish, Benjamin Franklin, and while I'm just mentioning...
Yeah, all of those guys, if they were alive today, I think they were rational enough to say, this is all fucking bullshit. What are you talking about all this crap for? Why are you talking about all these particles you never saw? They don't last more than a millionth of a second. Um, why are you giving them names when you have so little information? I mean, part of this you can sort of see here. I mean, you know, they have a much better picture of this stupid asteroid now, right? So if you go look at the images they had 2 weeks ago, the ones they drew, it looked entirely different, right? It's this long cigar-y thing with a bend in it, and completely different. So now they actually have a picture of the fucking thing, and yeah, nothing like what they thought it was. But it's really revealing what you see in the image. I mean, and so yeah, the Electric Universe guys are just making up all kinds of silly crap when it's just obvious what's happened. You can look right at the image and just see, yeah, there's two balls. They smashed into each other, not at a tremendous velocity, but at some velocity. They're probably both not all that hard, you know, and so they bore right into each other and stuck. And you can see the hole in the other one is probably something was stuck to it. It broke off. It's clearly a wound from something that did exactly what this thing did. It's exactly the same thing. They smushed into each other. That's what these mush craters are. And you can see where they filled in with a little bit of dust. You can see the little white stuff is probably dust. You know, and the dust is filling in the cracks and the voids and the depressions. But it's just so freaking obvious. And they're saying this is electricity. I mean, it's just insanely stupid. Oh, everybody's just such a fucktard. So anyway, let's just play along with... I mean, again, I've made it so clear. I have no interest in any conversation about anything you call a neutrino, okay? Non-existent, made-up, babbly bullshit doesn't play a goddamn role in anything. You want to believe in those fairy princesses? Go ahead. That Tinkerbell kind of crap? Go ahead. But I have no interest because it's not real. It's bullshit. It's a waste of fucking energy and time. It has nothing to do with the fundamental elements that we know are controlling everything, which is the force bits with the fucking momentum and the matter bits that are moved around by it. Oh, jeez.
Duration with that. And yeah, it worked. But then I was thinking last night, no, that is, it works, but I've got the wrong scale. I should have been looking at neutrinos. Because if you have two different two different gravity bits, a red one and a black one together, you get your basic neutrino type.
Right, and again, I've made it explicitly clear that the forces can't interact with force, that there's no fucking possible way that they're doing any of this togetherness shit. There's no example of a double photon. It's just crap. So you want to believe it, go ahead and believe it. I see no role for it to play. I see no hope of it having any meaning whatsoever. It's these invisible particles. You might as well be talking about dark matter. Complete waste of time.
Through ice than light. And
so he says they have evidence that neutrinos pass faster through ice. They don't have any fucking evidence. They have no such evidence. But one could clearly argue that if all neutrinos are is the same thing as a photon, except it's the little broken pieces. It's the energy, all right, but it's the energy not in a form that can affect an electron. That is, it can't vibrate it enough to create electricity or to knock the electron out of its orbit or to increase the pressure in some substantial way. So it's just residue energy. Fine, if that's all a neutrino is, but you wouldn't call it a neutrino then. You'd just call it a broken photon.
There's two possibilities, is because of their extremely small size, and secondly is because they have no electric or magnetic component.
Yeah, so again, this extremely small size thing, I think it's just horse shit. Oh, there's something smaller than photons, like that could make any sense at all. And that somehow, wouldn't these neutrinos then be bending the photons because they're hitting the photons? There's no evidence of that crap. So again, this is just crap. I mean, there's no hard evidence for any of these frickin' extra particles.
Generation. Now, if you look at the outer most.
So he's got these simulations of what they would imagine a photon would be if they could see one. So they just make up crap. Look at all this crap, right? Oh, it's got a magnetic part and an electrical part and this part and that part. Yeah, obviously it has nothing to do with anything I'm talking about. Obviously made up crap. I don't need to debunk that to debunk physics. All right, I got real experiments that we can point to. The two-slit experiment, interferometers, lots of experiments you can point right to and say, look, this is where they went wrong. Okay, this is where they turned everything into mush. And there's a rock-solid explanations for why these things have the outputs that they have, these experiments. You don't have to explain them with woo. The more just bullshit. Oh yeah, the photon's got this and it's got that and this is switching and this is doing that and this is so all this complex crap and something that's just dead fucking simple as it gets. It goes one speed and travels from point A to point B in a straight line. What does it need any of that crap for? It's the fucking simple little rock, like this frickin' asteroid here. You know, it's just a little fucking rock. The rock hits the electron and sticks to it almost like that. Makes the big rock move until the little rock flies off. Then it stops moving. Not much more complicated than that. Alright, so, yeah, I don't need to play a bunch of this crap. You get the idea. So it's just all, he just wants to talk about all of these stupid, idiotic particles, and he wants to give photons all kinds of complexity, and obviously I have no interest in any kind of conversation about this made-up physics, and it's just all made up. There's no experimental data whatsoever. So, screw that. Alright, so the Thunderbolt people, play some of this just because it's kind of, some of it's funny. You know. So they think that all of this stuff happened 5,000 years ago, right? The whole point of this Thunderbolts thing is just redoing Genesis all over again, okay? The guy, the Velikovsky guy, was basically a creationist. He wanted to turn physics into meet religion. He wanted to blend the two together. That's all this crap is about. And so they're trying to pretend that somehow all this stuff was going on, you know, just a few thousand years ago. Human beings would look up into the sky and a big giant planets would go flying by. I mean, it's just ludicrous on its face. And look at all of these people that support this mush, this barely veiled religion, and it's just so stupid. You know, looking at that asteroid picture, could you really sit there and say, oh yeah, that looks so electrical? I'm just amazed how electrical that looks. No, it doesn't look electrical.
And collapse pits. And the reason for that is...
So they're calling them collapse pits. But, I mean, can it get more obvious? I mean, the image, I mean, maybe I'll draw it. I mean, how can they even contrive this as anything other than what it looks like? It's quite obviously, this time, what it looks like, yes, is what it is like, okay? So there's no confusion between looks like and is like this time. I've run out of paper, unfortunately. My mouse isn't working very well either, so the computer might fail. Just trying to keep this stuff working is semi-irritating lately. All right, so, you know, I mean, you have this obvious shape, right? I mean, two objects in this little seam is so perfectly a seam. You know, this one obviously has created an indentation in this other one. It's stuck into it. It pushed into it. So it's almost like you can obviously even tell which one was moving. You know, like this one kind of. Well, I guess it doesn't really say that. I don't know. You could probably deduce it, though. And then you got this other hole right here in this thing that just, it's obviously the same kind of hole. Like if you pulled this one out, if this one left, you know the same hole was going to be left in that thing. So it's kind of obvious, and it's, you know, you can kind of look at it and say, yeah, it's hard to tell how well they're attached to each other, but you can sort of get the impression that, yeah, this is kind of soft, it just kind of pushed into it, and as long as something doesn't happen to agitate this system, something else hits it, then this will stay here. But if something else does hit it, this one might just pop off just like this one popped off. obviously, where the scar is. I mean, it's obvious, you know, obvious. The funny thing is they're saying that regular physics is saying, which is just, they're just lying about regular physics here, I think. That somehow what happened is two objects crashed into each other, turned into a tiny bunch of little particles, and that somehow the little particles recreated the same stupid shape, which would be impossible, you know. So, you know, they have clips in here. They're just, there's no way a real physicist said that. They're just making it up. So they just, again, if you have to lie about what the opposition is saying, doesn't that mean you're losing the argument? But yeah, obviously it works on imbeciles. Imbeciles like liars, and they just keep lying. You know, physics can't explain. Yes, they can. You know, you're not paying any attention.
Or seeing double, it was called. I pointed out that in the plasma cosmology view, stars are formed by interstellar Birkeland current filaments inside molecular clouds. In other words, it's a dusty plasma. And we know from research that's been done and published by Don Scott and others that the dust is accumulated much more powerfully into central objects on that filament by the...
Yeah, so now they're pretending that this is somehow a bunch of atoms and they're conveying electricity or something, and it's, oh yeah, sure, says you. You know, just crap. But, you know, it doesn't have too much to do with this asteroid being a few thousand years old, which is just idiotic. So, jump ahead a little.
By the sun after the formation of the sun. It had nothing to do with leftovers from the sun. And this explains all of the mysteries about isotopic compositions and the differences between the planets. Because our solar system, if you look at it dispassionately without the gravitational theory as a lens, a distorting lens, it's a fruit salad of objects. They're all different. They have different axial tilts, and their rotation rates are hard to explain. The angular momentum of the whole system is hard to explain on the gravitational theory.
So they keep saying it's hard to explain, when no, it's pretty easy to explain. The distances are exactly what you would expect for bodies that were created through a lot of interaction. And it's the whole reason why their orbits are sustainable, is that they did have interactions, because they had to slow their velocity down. They're in ellipses because they were introduced from the external world into the connection to the sun. If they had been produced by the sun, then they would have much more circular orbits, like galaxies, for example. It's funny how they just, physics has this so backwards, right? You have the perfectly spherical orbits around galaxies, round, and then you have the elliptical orbits in a solar system, and they have it backwards. Somehow the solar system is expanding and the galaxy is contracting, when it has to be the other way around. The stuff in the galaxy had to come from the inside out to be in a round orbit, and the stuff in our solar system had to come from the outside in to be in ellipses.
Exhibit behavior, magnetic fields, and weather patterns which are still unexplained.
Ever since One Day Under the Flowers came around, I've been out of work. He used to need Cupid to express love.
So they need these
now
commercials.
Given all of these facts, and when you realize that you're looking through every space shot that's been sent up to tell us how the solar system was formed, is viewed through this distorting lens of gravitational accretion.
Yeah, like somehow we have reason to doubt gravity. I don't know. I mean, how do people rationally say to themselves, "Oh yes, I'm going to believe in a theory that insults the concept of gravity," when it's so frickin' obvious? Let's jump ahead to where he has some of these images and see what he says. Oh, I predicted this and I predicted that. It's just such nonsense.
To switch to other high points near the central crater, and of course the nearest high point on a crater is the rim.
So somehow he thinks this, running electricity through sand or whatever the hell this is somehow explaining how craters are created, when it seems just so obvious. You just look at that frickin' asteroids, those two asteroids stuck to each other. You just say to yourself, I don't need any electricity to understand what happened. One of them plowed into the other one, As long as it wasn't too much energy, they're just mushed together. So yes, low velocity impacts. Wow. Huge surprise? No, all the shit is supposed to be going sort of the same amount of speed, because it isn't. It's 4 billion years later from when whatever the big bodies were that was smashed into pieces that are the frickin' asteroid belt.
And you'll notice there are at least 3 that I can see, smaller circular craters perched on the rim of that larger.
Yes, it seems quite obvious that this little blob here had a big blob stuck on it. It had a little nodule stuck on it. And this one had a nodule stuck on it over here. It seems quite obvious that's what happened. And you can see all the little craters. See, this thing's like, what, 4 miles? So we're talking about maybe 20 miles across for this thing. And you can see these little impact craters here. Like, obviously, stuff has been hitting this stuff. And these things, that's what happens when it hits. It bounces off in some cases. It hits, leaves a depression, and then bounces off.
Crater. Now, I'm calling it a crater. But the language in the report says the large circular feature about 4 miles or 7 kilometres across on the smaller of the 2 lobes appears to be a deep depression. Of course, the reason why they use the words deep depression is that for a crater to have occurred, it means that the collision must have been at high speed.
So again, that's where was that written in some book somewhere? Craters are only created by impacts at high speed. Where is that in the definition of a crater? No, a crater is created by something that hits something else. There's no speed requirements. So again, more horse shit.
And as we've said, the whole idea behind the standard model of trying to explain this object is low-speed collisions. 5 kilometres an hour or less, the sort of bump in a parking lot. That just doesn't...
Well, yeah, obviously, a bump in a parking lot without bumpers, and that's what you're going to get. 2 vehicles will blend into each other. And if nothing forces them apart, they'll stay blended into each other.
Work with a crater that size.
Right.
No, like I said, it won't work for a crater that size. Where'd you prove that? Where'd you demonstrate that anywhere? So again, we know that the small objects might be really quite mutable. They're not that hard. So something could just push into them. You see the craters on the surface are an indication that there's at least a dust layer on the surface that's pretty loose.
4 miles across, 7 kilometres across, that requires an impact which should have shattered the object. Because remember, these are supposed...
So again, they say it should have. Whose rule book says that? So again, false argument, just straw manning the physics to pretend that there's nothing else can explain it but frickin' lightning bolts. And lightning bolts don't explain it. How is he explaining how the 2 asteroids got smashed together? And they're clearly, what does he think? One grew out of the other one like a tumor? Clearly, the only way they got stuck together like that is they were separate and they became combined. Clear indication. And the fact that they both have some round symmetry indicates they were by themselves for quite a while before they collided. And that now, over time, they're going to try to go spherical again. I mean, the environment will make them spherical again. But I mean, the whole reason why they're probably still intact is the fact that they collided with each other and then flew out of the noisy place because of the impact. So because of the impact, they got a new trajectory and aren't in a place that's dirty anymore. And so they're staying that way because they're not hitting anything anymore.
Supposed to be ices and dust that have been accreted from a very thinly dispersed cloud of dust and gas.
Well, okay, I don't think anybody says the asteroid belt is made out of dust and gas. So clearly one of the theories is that it would have been a planet, except the 2 planets were too close to each other and they annihilated each other. So it's a bunch of pieces of crap. It's not dust and gas.
Right. You do not expect an object to form that is solid enough to receive an impact like that and survive. And what's more, so
again, an impact like that, he's still implying that somehow he knows that those two things could only collide one way. Each of them had to be going 50,000 miles an hour. When, again, where's the evidence of that? All those really fast collisions probably happened billions of years ago, and by now everything's going the same way. So that's another trick of gravity, you know, that nobody tells you. But if you throw a bunch of stuff from two directions into a gravitational well, the stuff will eventually all be going one way. One side will win, and everything will go the same way.
Distance from the sun, the orbital speed is very low, and any other objects that are following the same orbit will
So
only
again,
have minor differences in speed. And this is why they talk about a bump in a parking lot.
Right.
Because the analogy is fairly accurate based on the gravitational model. But
yeah, the orbital speed is very slow, but it's over all the particles. So some are going faster than others still, all right? But over time, yes, they'll all end up with they'll interact with each other, and through all those little interactions and tugs and pulls over time, they end up all going the same speed in the same direction eventually.
what we see has nothing to do with low-speed collisions. And what's more, impact craters themselves are an assumption, because in the gravitational theory, the only way to form craters like that is with impact. You're very limited in what you can actually explain.
Yes, and the impact just depends on direction. So theoretically, something can hit us when the Earth is moving this way and it's spinning this way, and then an asteroid could come in this way, and so it would hit with a completely differently and if it was coming against our momentum. So clearly it depends on which way it hits you, depends on how much power it's going to have in terms of the two combining of the two momentums. So again, let's not pretend that you can't get hit by an asteroid and have a soft bounce or a hard bounce.
With impact. No one has actually observed the before and after of a celestial impact of sufficient size to create a crater that size.
Well, we did see it on Jupiter. It's just we can't see through Jupiter's atmosphere, but you certainly saw what happened. The asteroid goes in, a big plume of crap comes flying out of Jupiter. So what do you mean we haven't seen it? They have that on videotape, so to speak. Well, in still images. So let's not pretend we haven't seen it. We have seen it.
So this is all mere speculation, or maybe just a story, a cover story, to hide our fundamental ignorance.
Right. Well, we should mention that
our fundamental ignorance that the cave paintings in Australia, they saw the truth. They saw Venus fly right overhead like the moon flies across the sky, and you know, the holy wiggle waggles happened, and there was a great movement of the trees back and forth, and therefore there we've learned something. I mean, this is just so bad. I mean, this let's bend the facts to defend old fabiology about the day all the trees fell down, the great floodication. I mean, it's just it's just terrible. This is awful. This fucking goddamn pseudoscience. Ugh. It's just so humiliating being human. How can people fall for this crap? So let's go a little bit further ahead. See, well, let's let this idiot talk. I mean, it's all very nice and professional, nice voices.
this crater, what we're calling it.
Oh, we're such sweet people. We're just talking about the horrible scientists who are covering up the truth that love is in the center of the universe, the big love asteroid.
Crater that we see on the smaller lobe of Ultima Thule. This is not the first instance when we've seen an object in our solar system with a crater that is so huge that it would have destroyed the body.
So again, there's no physics that says it would have destroyed the body. There's absolutely no law against a comet showing up that's going really slow. There's just no law against it. You know, there isn't. Well, let's say from coming from nowhere, I guess there would be a law because it's getting pulled by the sun, and we're still close enough to the sun that it would have to be going pretty fast by the time it got to us. But clearly, Saturn and Saturn's moons, And even our moon, we know that I mean, these people really do think that that crap on the moon happened 5,000 years ago. That's what they actually think.
It was caused by a kinetic impact. If you look at some of the moons of Saturn, Mimas and Tethys are the most dramatic examples. If you look at the Martian moon Phobos and Stickney crater.
Yeah, it looks just like an asteroid that had a clump on it, and the clump didn't stay. Clearly. I mean, what else does this look like? Look at the way the ground, it's pushed up around it. It's exactly like if something pushed in and it just came in slow enough and it just pushed the crap out. It didn't explode it out. It just pushed into it. And the two things probably sat there together, but then once some gravitational thing happened and it broke apart again. It looks just like the hole created when something bangs into you and it doesn't stick. It hits and then it pops back off.
And if you look at the asteroid Vesta, in all of these instances, you see craters which astronomers themselves admit should have shattered the body.
All right, so he says astronomers admitted. They didn't cite a name, did he? Who admitted it? What astronomer says so? And how much is he, who wants to throw a rock at him because he's an idiot? No astronomer would say anything so stupid.
They were caused by mechanical collisions and high-velocity explosions.
That's correct. The other evidence for...
So again, it's just pigeonhole and straw man. Complete straw man argument. Claiming that this is what conventional physics says. That the only impacts have to be at 50,000 miles an hour. Bullshit.
Or electrical scarring are the small, regular, circular pits on the larger lobe. At the top of the image that I'm looking at that was published, you can see there are 3 small circular pits in a row, and in fact there's a couple of...
Yeah, there's a bunch of little holes all across the thing, so we don't get to see all of them. There's little holes right here. There's lots of places where obviously smaller rocks have hit this rock, quite obviously. Boy, the mouse really isn't working. So he's talking about these, and so he's saying these prove electricity. These little holes here, that proves it was electricity. No, not even close. I don't know if there's any... Well, let's play a little more of it with that one.
Smaller ones heading up towards the top of the lobe. But then, almost in the shadow region, at the top you see another chain of craters. There's at least 4 there, and they may actually continue across the shadow to meet up with another one on the far side.
Yeah, there's a little one here, blah, 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 blah. Now, obviously, this you can come up with lots of scenarios where there could be junk that's in little packets of junk, little collections of junk, so you would have 10 impacts at a time. When we have a meteor shower, sometimes there's hundreds or thousands of meteors in a group, okay, because something else broke in some other interaction, but the broken parts are all still together, so you get hit by 5 things at once. Nothing unexplainable about that. And the fact that some things just bounce, that is, they hit the surface and bounce a few times on the surface before they would leave, that's certainly understandable also.
Now, crater chains are electrical formations. There's no other explanation for them.
So again, there's no other explanation except maybe I could throw a basketball and it keeps bouncing. Maybe that's an explanation.
In the inner solar system, the story went that an incoming bolide fractured more or less in space before it hit under the gravitational influence of the body that it was impacting. And they sort of splattered across the face of that object. But that doesn't explain the circularity, the fact that one crater doesn't just...
Well, it certainly explains it in the sense that if the thing came in and it actually did just bounce. Now, the fact that it's bouncing in 2 directions means it must have broken into pieces, but... the fact that there can't be any other explanation, that must be electrical. When I don't see electricity do that in my experience, frankly. I don't see that happen with electricity.
Disturb the other. And there's no fill from one crater that happened after.
Getting her a gift card for Valentine's? That's like giving her a bag of grapes and saying, here, make your own wine. Yeah, real romantic.
After another. So the electrical theory is, I submit, the only theory which can explain these features. And in fact, it's one explanation for all of the observations, not special...
yeah, well, whatever. For all the observations. Again, doesn't explain anything. Again, Leo, let's look at a picture of the moon and pretend these are electrical discharges. Electrical discharges. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, it just looks like it all over the place. When did we last see an electrical discharge on the moon? Oh, that's right, never. So he was complaining that we don't see crater impacts. Well, yeah, we don't see them anymore, but that's why we're still alive, is because, yeah, the solar system's gotten a lot quieter. But where do we see all these electrical discharges? Oh, that's right, we don't see any. Ever.
Without making any other ad hoc assumptions to all of the bodies we've seen since then.
Well, I think this actually might be a good point to just take a moment and examine some of the recent discoveries that we've reported here on Space News, which relate very directly to this question of our solar system's history and origins. So obviously, as one expects, the New Horizons team is holding to this traditional idea of a solar system that formed from a gravitationally collapsing nebular cloud, and this happened 4.5 billion years ago. And the only process they can imagine forming an object like Ultima Thule is gravitational accretion. And yet, the real question I have is what...
so again, yeah, everything's in gravity. That's why the pieces are round, again. And it had to take time for that to happen. But again, I don't know what they think is accreting except broken pieces of stuff. But whatever. I don't know. Who wants to argue all this stuff forever? There's just no evidence of any lightning bolts. So this is some other asteroid they have a picture of. Clearly, you know, made out of something different. In a different kind of, you know, it seems kind of obvious that it's younger because it's got a bunch of lumps in it still.
Vision of two objects in the early solar system. But based on the scientists' numerical calculations, it was determined that the nucleus would have crumbled or disintegrated countless eons ago. And therefore, it is only millions of years old rather than billions.
Yeah, I could have said that just because, I mean, it seems obvious that it can't be as old because it still has a bunch of... gravity doesn't like protrusions, doesn't like lumps, doesn't like... Gravity likes things to go nice and slick and round.
So among the other problems the comet scientists have faced, they have to try to explain the, quote, geological features we see, which includes complexly layered stratified rock, which is absolutely everywhere on the comet nucleus.
So again, we don't know what this stuff is made out of. So again, this idea that there's stratified rock when these are just layers of crap, you know, whatever the poo is made out of, and the poo has some wrinkles in it. So again, this idea that comets are, clearly they can be made of a lot of rocks in them, but they're rocks and ice. They're not stratified rocks. So again, that's their projection.
And further, there's the problem of how do you form a comet only millions of years ago rather than billions?
So I didn't realize they were talking about a comet. So comets obviously are going to have a really rough shape because of the fact that they keep doing the outgassing thing. So they keep exploding whenever the temperature changes. And so that's why they look so hideous.
Years. Well, here's what they came up with. Two fully formed comet nuclei in the late solar system experienced a violent high-velocity collision and exploded. And then after the comets exploded, as you can see in the computer animation the scientists created, even though the material would have been accelerated to tremendous velocities and in a near-zero gravitational sphere of influence.
So again, we don't have a name for these people. Who's did this? Like I said, this is a nonsense idea, right? Because we know if it did collect back together from little particles, it would have gone spherical. It wouldn't have reformed into a
We're told that rather than dispersing,
shape.
A portion of the destroyed material recoalesced and kept recoalescing and kept recoalescing to form 67P as we see it today. And now I don't think I need...
Well, I don't think anybody needs to give a shit about somebody doing this kind of projecting. This is just guessing. This doesn't have anything to do with science. You know, I mean, it's just guessing. All right. So this is they take a blurry image of electric arc and hammerite, and therefore this is the same as this. So anything that melts or anything that changes, we shouldn't expect some similarities. But I mean, again, this shape is clearly not the shape of what things will tend to be as they gain size in the universe. They'll tend to go spherical. So this obviously is two objects that ended up banging into each other.
7p and Ultima Thule to a portion of hematite that was blasted with an electric arc. So the question I have to ask critics of the electric universe theory is, do you care that all of the discoveries I just described were...
All of the discoveries, these aren't discoveries. I care that you don't have a single picture of a lightning bolt flying across a vacuum. That's what I care about. Oh, it's just pathetic. This is such a hopeless world. Idiots everywhere. So I do want to get to this two-slit phantasmagorical horse crap from a 1999 Christmas lecture at the Royal Institute of Bullshit. But again, it's just such bullshit. And so I can do the comment on that subject also at that time. So since the mouse is being uncooperative, I guess I'll move on. I don't know if I need to do this subject. So anyway, this guy, we posted a link to another electron gun where the guy just is basically pointing out that the beam moves away from the magnet or moves right into the magnet. So when the magnet's close, it does exactly what I stated it does. Because he's not trying to mimic the motor force. So you can force something to look like something, you know, and you can do it. You can present an experiment in one circumstance and say, see, this is what it does. But you know that all you do is change the environmental variables a little tiny bit, and it doesn't do that anymore. And that's the gimmicks here. You know, there's lots of room to play games with what it looks like. All right. So anyway, see this Lorentz law. We're just talking about the Lorentz force. You know, the whole Lorentz contractions and other kind of bullshit is a whole different subject. The Lorentz force just has to do with the right hand rule, and I explained that in the previous video. So anyway, it's probably enough. I don't want to switch subjects. At least I don't think I want to. Like I said, I better just save the video because the computer is acting as though it wants to freeze or something. Which this, you know, Mintet doesn't do too often, so I haven't had any real problem. I did load this other thing, this Canopix or whatever it's called, Canopix. Kind of interesting. I mean, it's really a little standalone Linux thing, but it's a bitch to get it to frickin' load on a hard drive, and yeah, it is crashy, which is annoying. I mean, it's really nice while it's working, but it's only it's this one computer. It shouldn't crash, but there's something. I switched the hard drive. I've switched, but it's, you know, it's just, I think it's just that computer is crashy. So there's something about it that Linux doesn't like. But anyway, that's a whole different. I'll do a Linux video eventually. So till the next time.